Hey, how's it going? My name is Riley, and I'm a documentary filmmaker that likes talking about everything from filmmaking and creativity to faith. I'm also a Sony user who likes making films and creating content with the Sony a7S Mark III. So if any of that interests you, be sure to hit the subscribe button in order to follow along. In today's video, we're going to be taking a look at lenses, and more specifically, lenses to use with the Sony a7S Mark III. I, like perhaps some of you, pre-ordered this camera over the summer and have been shooting projects on it over the past few months since it arrived this fall. And I've had the opportunity to pick up a couple of new lenses as well as pair this camera with some older lenses as well. And so I thought I would make this quick video to share what I feel like are some good lenses to use with this camera. I know that this can be a bit subjective based on the type of work that you do, but I think that these lenses are great value and have great image quality and go really nicely with this camera. All right, let's dive in. Now, this first lens is actually in the focal length that I would recommend, that if you could only have one focal length to use for shooting video content, it would be the 24 to 70 millimeter lens. And the reason for this is because 24 to 70s are a great balance between a nice wide angle as well as a medium telephoto as well. And the 24 to 70 focal length typically comes in an f2.8, which helps create that nice shallow depth of field to be able to separate your subject from the background. And the lens that I've picked up recently, and probably is actually my favorite lens of all time, is the Sony G Master 24 to 70. This is a near perfect lens. It's super sharp. It's sharp in all of the corners. The fall off in the out of focus areas and the bokeh is really pleasant, and the autofocus performance on this lens is just next level. It doesn't flare super easily, but when it does, it doesn't lose contrast, and it's pretty easy to control, and the colors on this lens are fantastic. And one pleasant surprise that I realized after picking up this lens is that it actually has this little button on the side that you can program to a handful of things. For me personally, I programmed it to start and stop recording, so I don't have to move my hand out from under the lens and find the record button on top. So there's a lot of thought and detail that have gone into this lens that really have made it excellent and a joy to shoot with. Now, I know you might be saying, this lens is super expensive at about $2,100. And that's true, it is a pretty expensive lens, but I actually think that it's worth every penny. This lens really is an amazing lens, but I would recommend actually not buying it new. I would recommend doing what I did, and that's to find it used. If you can find it used in a local camera store and get your hands on it, see that the lens is in fact in good condition, you can actually get this lens for around $1,500, which is actually pretty close in price to some of the third-party competitors like Sigma and Tamron. And while those are great lenses as well, if you're going to spend about that same amount of money, you might as well get the G Master quality for right around the same price. All in all, this is probably my all-time favorite lens, and I'm super happy that I picked it up. I'm also super happy that my wife let me buy it. The next lens on my list is the Sony Zeiss 16 to 35 f4. This little lens is small and light. It's great to throw on a gimbal. It's super sharp and has a great wide angle focal length. The autofocus works really well. But my favorite part about this lens is the way that it flares. Oftentimes when you flare a lens, if it's cheap or isn't a great quality lens, it's gonna haze the lens. And so it's gonna lift the shadows, lift the blacks, and it's just gonna be a mess in post to be able to color grade and really work with that lens. The colors lose contrast, and it's just not a great situation. But this lens keeps the contrast, it keeps the color fidelity, and it has some excellent character in the lens flares. It's something that I've never seen before, and often I look for the sun. I look for a way to be able to spike this lens and to get it to flare, because the shots are so interesting and it stays sharp while you're doing this. Now, it's not a perfect lens. It is going to have a little bit of distortion in the corners, especially at the wide end, but oftentimes when you're filming in that 20 to 16 millimeter range, you are pretty often keeping your subject in the center of the frame anyways. So it's not something that has gotten in the way. And I also think that this is an excellent value lens if you can find it used. On eBay, you can get it anywhere from $400 to $600, which is pretty crazy to me because it is a $1,200+ lens, and I think that it really can command that price point because of how sharp it is, because of the character that this lens has, and I really do think that it lives up to the Zeiss name. The third and final lens I want to talk to you about today is the Sony 70-300 G lens. Now, a good telephoto lens is probably an essential lens for any documentary filmmaker in their kit. Not necessarily this focal length, but actually having a good telephoto lens, I think, is essential for any documentary filmmaker to be able to get that shot inconspicuously from afar. I think is super valuable. Now, the reason I went with this lens is because it has good reach at 300 millimeters. It's sharp, has good autofocus performance, but the thing that I've been most impressed about with this lens is the performance of the image stabilization. The stabilization on this lens, when you combine it with the sensor stabilization of the a7S III, and then even if you add the active stabilization on top of that, is just out of this world. I have been able to get steady and smooth shots at 300 millimeters handheld that I would not have been able to previously get with a monopod. So I have just been completely blown away by this lens, and it's something that I think is going to come with me in my bag on many documentary shoots for years to come. It's also a pretty good value lens at around $800 or $900 used. You can find it pretty frequently because it has been out for several years now, so it's not that hard to find used as well. I think it's important to keep in mind that purchasing a nice lens is an investment that's going to last you several years, as well as a couple of camera bodies. So don't feel like you need to run out and buy the latest and greatest thing, and don't feel like you need to run out and buy everything all at once. It's okay if it takes you several years to invest in yourself and invest in your equipment. I've purchased these lenses over the course of a handful of years as well. Be sure to let me know in the comment section below what lenses you have been enjoying shooting with lately, especially if you are using the a7S Mark III. I certainly don't have an exhaustive list of every single lens, so I would love to hear from you what lens you've been enjoying shooting on recently. And as always, I would love it if you would consider hitting the like button, as well as consider subscribing. Those two things really are the best way to help me support this channel. Thanks so much, and I'll catch you guys in the next one.